When you hold a lunch or dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Now I ask myself all the time then, why are people inviting me over for dinner? I guess it's because I'm a poor cook, crippled in my culinary skills, I don't know. But they also know I definitely cannot repay them. I love going to family houses for dinner. And last year I had a brilliant idea. 15 families at St. Ambrose had invited me over to their house for dinner, let me in. And sometimes it was really, really fancy dinners. There's other times it was dinners where it was literally like a hot dog, which was awesome, by the way. But I decided I'm going to pay them back. I'm going to host a huge dinner for everyone that had me over to their house for dinner. I knew I couldn't do it in my rectory. It wasn't quite big enough. So instead I said, I'm having it in the cafeteria. And I started planning, what type of meal am I going to make? About 2 minutes in, I decided I'm ordering pizza, because this is impossible. There was no way I could ever pay them back in the same sense. But I love going to families' houses for dinner because I'm able to see the parishioners in a different light. Today I see you sitting there, hopefully paying attention to me, or looking at your iPhone. No one's doing that. Praise God. All right. But I get to see you in a different light when I'm over at your house for dinner. I get to see you for who you really are. And I get to know your family. And I love especially when it's just a nice family dinner. Nothing special. I don't need filet mignon. It's nice if you have it. But instead, I like hot dish, and I like kids throwing food at me. But what I've learned over the years is that when I go to someone's house for dinner, the most important question I ask when it's time for dinner is, where would you like me to sit? Now, I know this from my own personal experience with my family. As you know, I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and everything we had at our house was assigned. Of course, assigned bedrooms, that's a given. But assigned bed, because otherwise we'd fight over that, assigned dresser, assigned socks, everything had to be assigned, otherwise we fought over it. When you went into the van, the 8-passenger van, assigned seats. You don't mess around with that. And especially at dinner, we all had our assigned spots. Dad would sit over here, then Luke, then Mark, that would be the boys. My mom would be right here, Anna and Leah, and Sarah was a left-hander, so of course she sat at the end of the table. Now, I was the youngest, so that means I sat at the head of the table. Not because I was the best, but rather that way Mom and Dad could both help me put mashed potatoes in my mouth. It was awesome. When I got to be 4 or 5 years old, though, we started having guests over, and if God forbid they sat in the wrong spot, because you would have thought that World War III was about to break out, because I would go off on them. You're sitting in the wrong spot. You're sitting in the wrong spot. You're sitting in the wrong spot. And eventually, they would move. So I realized as a priest, when I go to someone's house, I have to ask them, where would you like me to sit? And it's very important you ask like the 4 or 5-year-old, because the parents will give you a different answer. One time I asked the parents, I said, where would you like me to sit? So I sat down, and about 3 or 4 minutes later, I had to move because the 4-year-old humbled me enough by crying and yelling, saying that I was sitting in the wrong place. If you've ever been humbled by a 4-year-old, it's a very, very embarrassing experience. So now I've learned my lesson. But why do I bring all of this up? Of course, we hear today what? That when we go to a wedding banquet, wherever we go, we're supposed to choose the lowest place. Of course, the main message, of course, is what? For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. We are called to be humble in everything we do. We hear about this in our first reading from Sirach as well, that the righteous, that those who have much are called to humble themselves. Of course, who is our perfect example? We know this is Jesus Christ, who humbled himself to take on our humanity. This is a prayer that is prayed every single day at Mass. It's a silent prayer prayed by the priest, but in the mingling of the water and wine, the prayer goes like this. May the mingling of the water and wine, by the mingling of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. So we are able to participate in God's divinity because God humbled himself to take on our humanity. Who is our perfect example? It is God. Even when that means we have to humble ourselves to outreach to other people or do things that may be below us, it is worth doing because in turn, God is going to exalt us. Now, of course, Jesus is our perfect example, but I think there's a very practical example recently we saw as well, and that is Pope Francis. The day after he got elected, what did the news reports all say about him? Well, they had a picture of him going to his hotel room that he was staying at, picking up his luggage. There's nothing really that shocking about this. He needed his toothbrush, he needed his clothes. But the thing that was shocking about it was he would have millions of people that gladly would have gone and done this for him. I know I would have signed up. Yet he's like, I can do this. It's not below me. And of course, his humility is being shown over and over and over again in his pontificate. Now, we can't say that Benedict wasn't humble either, by the way. He was in his own way. As it's been reported over and over again, before Benedict was elected Pope, and when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, he would go to John Paul II and say, can I please leave now? Can I go back to Germany? Can I continue my studies? Can I be a teacher? And John Paul II would say, no, I need you here. And so he gave himself up to God's will. In his own humility, he said, I will go ahead and continue to do this. They're different striking ways, but they're both examples to us that what humility comes down to is essentially giving ourselves up to God and his will. We're called to be humble. What does that mean? That we have a view of ourselves not as the greatest one in the world. We are not. We are not the greatest lawyer out there. You're not the greatest mom out there. You're not the greatest father. You're not the greatest football player. And that's okay. Now, we also have to be careful when we're talking about humility, that you don't have a false sense of yourself that you're the worst. You're not the worst lawyer. You're not the worst mom. You're not the worst dad. You're not the worst football player, probably. So what does humility then really mean for us? When we are humble, then we can see what God has in store for us and the areas that we can improve, that we see ourselves for what we truly are, God's sons and daughters who are not perfect. We are never going to be perfect. Yet we hear from Jesus in the Gospels that we are called to strive for perfection. Now, the minute that we think that we're perfect, that we don't need to improve anymore, then the devil has won. Now, we know the sin against humility is what? It's pride. That we're prideful in ourselves. And pride can creep in many different ways. Look how good I'm doing because I'm coming to adoration every single week. Look how good I'm doing because my son is a starting quarterback. Look how good I'm doing because all of my kids go to Mass. That's pride. Now, maybe your kids aren't doing this. That's not all right. We want them to go to Mass. But in the same sense, just like humility, we say, but I'm not the worst mom. I'm not the worst dad. So in humble and humility, we see that there's areas for us that we always need to work on. Not only as people, but also as a parish. We should be a humble parish. A parish that is always seeking to be exalted not by what we do, but exalted by God. I've now been here officially for 2 months, and this is a great parish, there is no doubt about it. But in certain things, we kind of are a little prideful in things. We do this the right way. Our way is the only way. We can never change because we know all of the answers. God calls us to be humble, to see ourselves for who we truly are. Yes, a great parish, but a parish that continues to need to be exalted by God, not by ourselves. A parish that always will have rooms for improvement. This will never be the perfect parish. You and I will never be the perfect people. I will never be a perfect priest. I strive for it, but I know it's not going to happen because I am not God. So what we need to do is humble ourselves and go to God and say, God, where are the areas that I'm not doing so well at? Help me to overcome this. And when we do this thing, God will exalt us. St. Benedict has a great image of humility. Imagine a ladder. Every single time that we humble ourselves, we actually climb up the ladder. Every single time we exalt ourselves, we go down the ladder. Now, where is the ladder's base at? It's the earth. It's this world. The more we exalt ourselves for this world, we're actually going down towards the earth. So where's the top of the ladder? Of course, it's heaven. And every single time we humble ourselves and we give ourselves over to God, then we're actually exalted to go closer to Him. As our responsorial psalm says today, what? God has prepared a dwelling place for those who are poor. Our second reading talks about this too, that we're called to strive to make our eternal dwelling with God. But the way we do this is not by exalting ourselves, by not saying how good we are. Once again, we do many things good. I don't want to have the wrong notion here. We don't want to fall into the point where despair that we don't do anything right. But in humility, what we see is we see ourselves for truly what we are, which are God's sons and daughters, who he loves, who he cares for, who he humbled himself for. But then to go to him and humble ourselves as well. To be humiliated is okay. To act humbly in everything we do. So when that 4-year-old humbled me, it was embarrassing. I moved spots. It was quite embarrassing. But the beautiful thing about it was, I've had another chance. You know, in the end, God is either going to exalt us or he is going to humble us. And what this is going to mean is this will be the final judgment. And at the final judgment, do we want to be exalted by God or do we want to be humbled? Let's climb the ladder. Let's climb the ladder towards God by humbling ourselves here on earth.